Welcome to Medical Myths, Legends, and Fairy Tales. I'm your host, Dr. Alan Christensen. Look, you know that between the latest online fads and the crazy media headlines, it's easier than ever to get confused about your health. And you and I just want to feel better and live longer. We want to know what works. And we can't wait for further studies. We need to make decisions today based on the best evidence we've got. Well, that's exactly what this show is here for. So let's get to it.
Hi there, this is Dr. Linda Kashaba from Integrative Health. Would you like some help with your thyroid? We would absolutely love to help you out. And guess what? We can even do remote care. Please call us today at 480-657-0003 to set up your first appointment. If you mention code podcast20, you will get 20% off from your first visit. That phone number again is 480-657-0003, and the code is podcast20. Can't wait to meet you.
Hey, Dr. C here with you. You know, we've all had tough things happen in life, and I think they're especially difficult when we feel that they were done to us. And there's an idea which I think is not always helpful, that you just got to get over it. You know, time makes things better, and if it doesn't, then there's some shortcoming about you. And that's just not that true and not that simple. So I'm really excited to share my friend Debi Silber with you. She's an expert on the concept of betrayal and post-betrayal syndrome. She's a holistic psychologist, PhD. She's been an expert in mindset and personal development, #1 Amazon bestseller. Her book is called The Unshakable Woman. She's also got a very popular TEDx talk on betrayal, speaks nationwide, but really powerful story about how this is a facet of life we don't think about. It can be a big source behind chronic symptoms, digestion, hair loss, mood symptoms, also a lot of subjective symptoms, things like fatigue or brain fog. So huge thing, and different from a lot of other emotional, psychological traumas that we can experience. So Debi and I had a really good talk about the nuances of betrayal, about how it's affected her personally, you know, how she's grown from that, and how one can get stuck in patterns for decades or a lifetime because of it. And yet it's possible to move past that. And she gives some resources on how you could know if this is affecting you, if you've got some level of post-betrayal syndrome, you know, where you are in that continuum and what you can do about that. So please enjoy this talk I had with Dr. Debi Silber. Debi, how the heck are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. So looking forward to our chat.
Yeah, me too. And yeah, good to connect, and always good to have time with you. And the day been going well so far? What have you been up to today?
A whole lot of helping people heal from betrayal.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
And you're in clinical practice, right?
You know, it's between the programs and private clients. It's just so amazing. You know, betrayal just has so many different faces. And what's so interesting is so often people have been struggling for years, decades, a lifetime, and they don't even realize it's an unhealed betrayal. And we start talking about it and they say, oh my gosh, you know, I heard you on that podcast or during that talk and I had no idea that's what's behind all of this. And it sure is.
Wow. We're going to go deep in betrayal. For starters, can you just tell us what brought that on your radar as being like a real persistent cause of suffering for people?
Mm-hmm. Well, you don't study something like betrayal unless you have to. And, I had two horrible betrayals. First, my family and then my husband. And it sent me right into this PhD program in transpersonal psychology, the psychology of transformation and human potential, because I needed to know why, people do what they do and how the mind works and frankly, how I could heal. So while I was there, I did a study and I studied how we experience betrayal, what holds us back, what helps us heal. And that study led to 3 groundbreaking discoveries, and they were just so exciting that I've been sharing them ever since.
Wow. So we'll go through those discoveries in good detail. How would you define betrayal for someone who might have a preconception about, maybe a limiting preconception about what it means to them?
I define it as it's the breaking of a spoken or unspoken rule. Every relationship has rules, and of course, the more we trust and the more we depend on someone, the bigger the betrayal. So, for example, a child who is completely dependent on their parent, and then the parent does something awful, well, that's going to have a bigger impact than, let's say, your coworker taking credit for your idea. Still a betrayal, but it would have a much different impact. And, we can be betrayed by just about anybody. Let's say it's a coach, a mentor, a teacher, someone in a religious capacity. The understanding is, listen to me, I'll keep you safe. And then they don't. That's a betrayal. It could be a best friend. Your secret's safe with me. And then they see read about their secret there on Facebook. That's a betrayal. It could be siblings. We'll take care of mom and dad one day when they need us. Well, that day arrives and they're nowhere to be found. I think we typically think of romantic betrayal. There's workplace betrayal too. I mean, and self-betrayal. When you promise you'll never drink that, smoke that, do that, and you do. That could be self-betrayal. I mean, I was just speaking with a woman the other day. She said, Debbie, I've been juicing, I've been exercising, I've been eating well. I have cancer. My body betrayed me. So it's wide range of definitions.
So much broader than someone might think.
Mm-hmm.
So what is distinct about it that makes it really persist? We've got an idea that just time gets a lot of things better, but your work has shown that for betrayal, time alone is often not enough. So what's different about it, do you think?
And it's so interesting you say that. We've been taught time heals all wounds. I have the proof that no, it doesn't. We have an assessment on the site to see to what extent someone is struggling with post-betrayal syndrome, which was actually one of the 3 discoveries, that there's actually this collection of physical, mental, and emotional symptoms tied to betrayal, that it's now we call it post-betrayal syndrome. And we've had about 4,000 people or so take the assessment just since last year. And there's a question on there, and it says, is there anything else you'd like us to know? I read every one of them. And I'm reading things like, my betrayal happened 30 years ago. I'm no longer willing to trust. My betrayal happened 40 years ago. I still feel the hate. My betrayal happened 15 years ago. I feel gutted. So we know time, really isn't doing the healing. I teach face it, feel it, heal it. It's only when we're willing to take a look at that can we make some sense and meaning out of it and heal. But time alone will not do the job.
And that's distinct from other types of trauma that someone might face. It's more pronounced or more prolonged with betrayal, it seems. Or
absolutely. And one of the other things, that's another thing too. One of the other discoveries was, originally I was studying something called post-traumatic growth, which I'm sure many of your listeners have heard of, where it's sort of the upside of trauma, where your trauma, regardless of what it was, whether it was death of a loved one, disease, devastation of some kind, let's say losing your house in a house fire, whatever it is, where that trauma left you with a new insight, perspective, awareness that you didn't have beforehand. But I had been through death of a loved one, and I'd been through disease. I had peritonitis, so I was in ICU for 11 days. I mean, it's a miracle I'm alive. But I felt that betrayal was so different than other types of traumas that I had experienced, but I didn't want to assume. So I asked my study participants, I said, those of you who've been through traumas besides betrayal, does it feel different? Does betrayal feel different to you? Unanimously, they said, oh, it's vastly different. And one of the biggest differentiators was, and so anyway, we coined a new term, post-betrayal transformation, because not only is there this new insight, perspective, awareness, but when it comes to healing from betrayal, you have to heal the self, everything that was demolished in that because of that betrayal, that sense of rejection, abandonment, worthiness, confidence, trust. When you lose someone that you love, you mourn the loss, you miss them. You don't question the love. With betrayal, you question it all. You question everything. And it's also with other types of traumas, we don't necessarily take it personally. Betrayal feels very personal. So it requires a different type of healing, different protocol.
That just, that made sense. And I could see where you're not only just questioning that person's feelings towards you, but then of course you end up just questioning yourself and your own value and your own self-worth.
Because, that's the thing. It's without our awareness or consent, someone chose to put their needs above ours. And, when you think about it, we're not betrayed by people we don't know. It's by the people we're the closest to. So here we put our trust, our faith, our love in this person, whether it's a parent, whether it's a partner. And then we're blindsided. I mean, there's just no other word for it, because we've been playing by the rules that, that relationship was sort of based on, and assuming that the person that we put our trust in really was playing by those same rules, and they weren't. And it's such a shock to the body and mind.
And the body and mind. So there's physical ways this manifests, you've discovered.
Physical, mental, emotional. It affects us on every level. Like here, just to give you an example, and I'll go over some specific symptoms if you'd like, but when you think of how it affects us, let's say with relationships, if you've been betrayed, a really common thing is if you don't take the time to change and I'm not saying that this was our fault that we're betrayed, but to learn from the experience, to do things differently, whether it's to reset boundaries, whatever it is, we can often experience repeat betrayals. So that's really common. Or what happens so often is we've been so burned, we've been so hurt that we keep everyone at a distance, and we put that big wall up. And sure, we keep out the bad guys, but we keep out the good guys too. We see it in health, where someone spends an endless amount of time and money going from one amazing doctor to the next to manage stress-related symptoms, illnesses, conditions, disease, where the root of that stress is that unhealed betrayal. We see it in business. In business, we see it where someone, let's say they've been, the person they trusted the most proved untrustworthy. So now here you are supposed to be collaborating on a project with a coworker, or trusting, your boss. Trust was shattered with the person you were closest to. So here you don't want to be a team player. You don't feel safe. Or maybe you're working in a company and you want to ask for that raise or promotion, but your confidence was shattered because of your betrayal. So you don't have the confidence to ask for that raise or promotion. So you're bitter and resentful instead. So, we see it in so many areas of life.
And as you talked about that, I thought about there are scenarios in which someone could just distance themselves and exit a relationship in which they felt betrayed. And it sounds like that by itself wouldn't necessarily bring closure. And there's also times in which maybe it's just that's not the appropriate step, or it's a relationship that's, a very close family. One can't really do that. So how does it play out differently when someone's still around the betrayer versus when they're not?
It can play out in so many different ways. And it's interesting because in the two betrayals that I had, one, there was the, forgive and move on. And there was really no hope in rebuilding or no desire to rebuild. That was actually with my family. And then there was my husband, where there was a complete crash and burn of the marriage we had. And then I did the work to heal. And this is what happens too. When you just are committed to doing things differently and learning whatever lesson it was that you needed to learn. Like in my case, I here I have 4 kids and 6 dogs, and I'm managing a business, and it's always been about everybody else. I wasn't even on my own to-do list. And one of the first things I realized was, oh my gosh, I don't do anything to take care of myself. So here, this may not be what other people choose to do, but one of the first things I chose to do was register for this PhD program. And thankfully I did, because it led to such wonderful things, but it really created an entirely new version of me, who was just, I was so much more willing to take my own needs into consideration, and I healed and I grew. And as I did, my husband, who, he lost everything because of this. And, he realized, well, this was a beautiful opportunity for him to heal and grow as well. And actually, not long ago, we got married again to each other as 2 completely different people. New vows, new rings, new bridal party. Our own kids were our bridal party this time. So totally different experience. So it really depends. I teach something. It's called something else. I call it the window of willingness. And this is where you're the most to the least likely to forgive and rebuild. And I'm happy to go over this, if you like. It's going to make it so clear.
Please.
Okay, sure. So
Yeah, please do.
if you picture a window, and the window is the widest open, and this is where and this is level 1, and this is where there's remorse and apology and empathy and restitution. This person has taken full and complete responsibility. So it looks like this. It sounds like this. I am so terribly sorry for what I've done. I can't even imagine the heartbreak and pain I caused. What can I do to make it up to you? Now, of course, you'd say this if you spilled, coffee on someone, right? So if it's a betrayal, it's going to take a lot more than that. But at least you're working with the most right here. You could see the window closing a little bit with this next one. And this one involves excuses. So when you hear the word because, this is coming. I did it because of this. I said it because of that. Now, you still may be willing, but you're not nearly as willing and eager when you're hearing the excuses.
You're saying there are circumstances out of your control. Yeah.
Because, and you're hearing because, so it's coming. Level 3, this is one of the ones that makes us absolutely crazy. And this one involves blame. So it sounds like this. Well, I did it because you did that. I said it because you said that.
Wow.
And you hear the word you, and you know what this is about. And I call this one the two-sided slap, as if it wasn't bad enough that someone betrayed you. Now they're blaming you somehow for it. So the kiss of death here is if you believe that. I mean, this is the stuff of crazy making right here. And there's really very little to work with here. So the window is maybe open a crack, but not open, not open much. And then there's the 4th level. And this one is complete denial, taking absolutely no responsibility for their actions and behaviors. And there's nothing to work with here. So, so I always say, closure is our job and justice is karma's. I mean, really, all you can do here is do your work to heal and forgive for your sake, not for theirs, and move along.
I'd love to have your thoughts on the idea of forgiveness and atonement and how that can play out. I've heard a lot of discussions about there have been public figures called out for things they did that were wrong, and they were rightfully called out for that and sanctioned. And the question is, at what point how does that work? Where is there a path by which someone can say, hey, look, I did screw up and now I've done X, Y, Z. And, what are your thoughts about that, I guess, from the betrayer's side? What does the path to atonement look like for someone?
Sure. Well, first, someone who's betrayed has to at least acknowledge, I mean, you know this, shame is one of the most physically destructive emotions we can have. So if someone's, if someone's walking around with that feeling of shame, it's so physically destructive. And how do you heal shame? You bring light and honor to it. So one of the best things that that person can do, without any expectation of how it's going to be received, is to take responsibility, own it. And be so honest about it. And from their place of consciousness at that time, they were doing whatever they felt they were entitled to do, they could do, they should do, whatever it is. But at least when they take that responsibility, and the key here is with no expectation. So often though, and sometimes it happens, that person isn't willing to listen. They're not even alive, whatever it is. And then the best you can do is pay it forward. I mean, one of the things my husband does all the time, he has a huge office with 40 plus people working there. He has meetings all day long with people telling them not how to ruin your life and, and all these things. So you could take it truly to whatever level you want. Now, on the betrayed person's side, they're dealing with anger and resentment and bitterness. And so many, those emotions are almost equally as destructive. So, forgiveness is really the kind of thing that I think also what people need to understand is it isn't this one big grand moment. Ta-da, you're forgiven. It doesn't work like that. It happens in layers and stages. And I look at it like with trust. Trust takes a lot of time to build. And I look at it as a brick wall where that wall is built brick by brick by brick. It could take 10, 20, 30, 40 years, but it could be torn down in moments. How do you rebuild it? The same way, brick by brick by brick. And forgiveness happens along that same timeline where it's a slow process when that person over time learns to feel safe and valued. And when someone feels safe and valued and they forgive, they feel better for it. When they do not feel safe and valued and they forgive, they feel worse. And actually, I could share even the 5 stages from betrayal to breakthrough that we discovered. And there were 3 groups as well.
Please.
Yeah, and there were 3 groups who didn't heal, and I can tell you the groups that didn't heal as well. You tell me, which would you like me to talk about first?
Go for the 5 stages, please.
Sure. So, okay, the first is like a setup stage, and I saw this with every single participant. If you imagine 4 legs of a table, the 4 legs being physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, what I saw with every single participant, me included, there was this real heavy lean on the physical and the mental, and kind of neglecting the emotional and the spiritual. So what does this look like? It looks like we're really good at thinking and doing, and not spending the time on the feeling and being. What's also characteristic of this stage is the feeling and being is where our intuition is. And just about every woman in the study said, every person in the study said, I felt something wasn't right, but I was too busy. I wasn't really paying attention. Something didn't seem right. And so they didn't trust their intuition. So now you can imagine if there's a table with only 2 legs on the ground, easy for that table to topple over. So that's exactly what happens in stage 2. Stage 2, we're blindsided. And this is the breakdown of the body, the mind, the worldview. So here we've ignited the stress response. So we're headed for just about every stress-related symptom, illness, condition, disease. No one knows this better than you with what you teach, right? The mind is in a complete state of chaos, overwhelm, confusion. We can't wrap our mind around what we just learned. And there's a breakdown of the worldview, our mental model. That's how we view the world. This is safe. Don't go here. These are the rules. And in a moment, all the rules and the whole construct is shattered. And a new mental model hasn't been formed yet. So this is a terrifying space. And this is the scariest stage. I had one participant saying, you know what it felt like? It felt like every negative emotion you can experience and losing a child in a crowd. Like it feels like that. That sucker punch, that takes the wind out of you. I mean, all of that. And then this is where, if you can imagine, if you're walking down the street and the bottom were to bottom out on you, that's what this feels like. And then what would you do, though? You would grab hold of whatever you could to stay safe and stay alive. And that's stage 3. Survival instincts emerge. This is an entirely practical stage. If you can't help me, get out of my way. How can I survive this experience? How do I feed my kids? Where do I live? What do I do? Where do I go? Very practical. This is the stage, I'll tell you, though. If we're not careful, this is the one we get stuck in. For it could be decades, it could be for life. I see it all the time. And I could talk about what that looks like too. If we're willing to let go of our story, if we're willing to let go of the life we wanted and we don't have, and all those things that go along with it, we can move to stage 4, which is finding and adjusting to a new normal. Here, our old normal doesn't exist anymore. It's not an option. So this would be as if you've ever moved into a new house, condo, apartment, office, whatever. It doesn't feel quite cozy yet. You don't have all of your things there, but it's going to be okay. And you're kind of telling your stress response, we're going to make this work. We're headed towards safety right here. So you may not be physically healing just yet, but you're not doing the damage you were doing, let's say, in stage 2 and stage 3. When you're here for a while, you're also, this is the stage 2, where if someone wasn't a good friend to you, where they were sort of just taking and it was a one-sided friendship, you're redefining the boundaries, you're resetting the rules, you're recreating, you're making a whole new set of rules based on what you're working with now. And when you're settled into that space for a while,
when you're still in relationship with that person,
or just even friendships, or it's really anybody, you're redefining everything that you've allowed, what you're no longer willing to accept. It's like a
your
whole
trust
redefining,
level.
Trust level, all of it. And when you're there for a while and you're feeling safe and you're feeling stronger, you can slowly move into the 5th most beautiful stage. This is healing, rebirth, and a new worldview. So here, the body starts to heal. You didn't have the bandwidth earlier on as well, for self-love, self-care. You weren't thinking about eating well or exercising. You were surviving. And here now you want to take better care of yourself. You want to nurture yourself. You want to show yourself love because you realize you deserve it. You want to heal. Your mind starts to heal because you're making new rules. You're making a whole new mental model. And there's a new worldview. And it's based on who you've become because of the experience. And that the table where we were only prioritizing the two legs in the beginning, now we are solidly grounded because now we're focused on the emotional and the spiritual too. Those are the 5 stages.
And you mentioned that there were some who did not heal.
Mm-hmm.
There were some groups that didn't respond. What was different about them?
Yeah, and it was interesting because as a researcher, you're not supposed to have any preconceived ideas or any biases. And I was new at this; I was doing my best, but I assumed that the people who were the hardest hit would grow the least because they had the most to overcome. I was dead wrong. That had nothing to do with it at all. And what I found was the ones who were willing to do the work, to face those demons, to make some sense and meaning out of their experience, they did. Because I noticed that there were these 3 groups that didn't heal. Because, so the first one, if they were numbing, avoiding, distracting, maybe they were put on mood stabilizers or anti-anxiety medications, or maybe they were numbing themselves with alcohol or food or TV, whatever it was. Sure, maybe it made the day a bit easier to get through. They didn't heal. They didn't heal because they didn't do the work.
We'll be right back after a word from Integrative Health.
We hope you're enjoying this episode of Medical Myths, Legends, and Fairy Tales. This is Dr. Raquel Espinal at Integrative Healthcare. So often we hear from our new patients that their primary care physician has told them that their thyroid and hormone levels are fine and they should not worry. Yet the patients still have symptoms of severe fatigue, thinning hair, and weight issues. Unfortunately, this is too common with thyroid care. The good news is we can help and there is hope. The doctors at Integrative Health, including myself, specialize in naturally treating your thyroid, your hormone, and adrenal issues. We would love to get you started on the path to ideal health. From the comfort of your own home, you can get treatment with one of the doctors at Integrative Health via telemedicine. Go to integrativehealthcare.com to become a new patient today. Use the code PODCAST20 for 20% off your new patient visit. Again, that is integrativehealthcare.com and use the code PODCAST20, all one word. Get back to the road to thriving. We look forward to seeing you.
And now, back for more medical myths, legends, and fairy tales. Are you familiar with Dr. Irving Kirsch's work about antidepressants?
No.
Pretty fascinating stuff. I did an interview with him on this. I've known of his work for a little while. But when you look closely at the studies that were done so when the drug is approved, it has to have studies showing that it works better than placebo. Mm-hmm. But the drug companies can run multiple studies and submit the ones they choose and not submit the others. And so he pulled the ones that were not submitted and ran them all together as an intentional review, and basically showed that the class of SSRIs were not more effective than placebo. And then his work went further through other researchers, going back to all classes of antidepressants that have been approved ever, mm-hmm. and did the same type of work on that. And basically, all of them have had times in which they've seemed to work, mm-hmm. but when they were compared to placebo in controlled settings, none of them were ever superior. Wow. And what he did show too is what you were just saying, how people who were treated with antidepressants, they would have lower rates of lasting symptom resolution. Mm-hmm. So like you're just saying about just numbing and having things go away. So yeah, mm-hmm. the extent to which they helped was not because of their chemistry, but the drawback of the chemistry is they seem to give people a harder time to have these symptoms go through a cycle and then heal themselves.
Wow. And it's so interesting. And that's exactly what we found as well. They just didn't heal nearly as well as people who didn't take anything, but they just said, okay, I have to dive in and just make some sense out of this. So yeah, so that was one group. The next group, they were unwilling to accept their betrayal. like where they just said, no, I'm not moving on from this experience. Nope. This is my story and I'm sticking with it. And although
Wow.
they had every right to, and it was a profound story, and I get it because I hear those stories every single day, and they feel justified, and I understand completely. Although they have a right as well to recreate their life if they choose, but they don't understand that, and their story has become so powerful and so a part of them, and they don't want to give it up for the unknown, although the unknown is a story that would serve them so much better. But they don't
Mm.
see that at the time. So that was the second group. And the third group, this was interesting. This is the group, they didn't heal when the betrayer had no consequences. So let's take a marital betrayal, when either for religious reasons, financial fear, or just not wanting to break up the family, they did whatever they could to try to accept the betrayal. And I'll tell you, by far, hands down, this was my most physically sick group.
Oh, wow. So
Hmm.
they felt that for reasons outside of their own control, they didn't have an option to
Hmm.
leave.
Hmm. And they were the ones who struggled the most with all kinds of symptoms, illnesses, conditions, disease. Hmm.
What were some physical conditions that were common amongst that group?
One of them had a stroke. Um, just about any adrenal symptom, any stress related symptom. They had gut issues. I mean, the gut issues were so common among almost all, but severe gut issues with this group: anxiety, uh, hair loss, um, weight changes. Um, and even the mental and emotional issues of not even able to get out of bed, not able to raise
Mm.
their kids. It was it this was the most extreme.
So a lot of those are probably diagnosed as chronic fatigue or related issues like
Hmm.
that. Or
Hmm. But severe gut issues. I mean, there was one I remember. She was going to the hospital constantly with a severe gut issue, and the minute she moved towards healing and really started doing the work, she never went to the hospital again. Gut issues completely cleared.
wow.
Hmm.
It's a perfect segue. I was going to ask. So, if someone's listening and they've had a particular diagnosis or symptom or issue, what are some other ones that could make them think, "Hey, I might want to think about betrayal being relevant for me."
Well, you know what? I can even read you some statistics that I see all the time, and this way, people can know. You could see to the extent that this stays with us. So
Yeah.
here's like, and this is based on, let's say, 4,000 people who've taken it. 78% constantly revisit their experience. So now think about it. If you're revisiting and you're ruminating over this negative experience over and over and over again, all you're doing is drowning in these stress hormones and chemicals that are creating significant physical, mental, emotional wear and tear. 81% feel a loss of personal power. 80% are hyper vigilant. Just that, you're on high alert 24/7.
Mm.
94% deal with painful triggers. 64% say they struggle emotionally. As far as the physical symptoms, 71% have low energy, 68% have sleep issues, 63% extreme fatigue, 47% weight changes, 45% digestive issues. Just some mental challenges. 78% felt overwhelmed. 70% are walking around in a state of disbelief. 68% unable to focus, 64% in shock, and 62% unable to concentrate. So now imagine here you're trying to get through your day or raise your family, take care of your kids.
Wow.
Some of the
You're tired
emotional.
and you can't think
Mhm.
clearly.
Yeah. 88% extreme sadness, 83% anger, 82% feeling hurt, 80% anxiety, 79% stressed. Just think of what those emotions can do alone. And here you
Hmm.
are trying to get through your day. 84% have an inability to trust. 67% are preventing themselves from forming deep relationships because they're afraid of being hurt. 82% say they find it's hard to move forward, and 90% want to move forward, but they don't know how. So people want to
Hmm.
heal. They don't even know there's a way. I mean, that's why I can't speak about this topic enough, because now we have a roadmap. Not only do we know the 5 stages, we know what happens at every stage, and we know what it takes to move from one stage to the next. So basically, as long as someone's willing, healing is predictable.
So they can know if this is relevant or not to them, but also that they can almost categorize themselves and know where they would be in that continuum, you're saying.
Mm-hmm. They'll know what stage they're in. The minute I speak with someone, I know exactly where they are. They're in a stage 2, a stage 3, a stage 4. Mm-hmm. And the beauty of that is then we say, okay, this is what it's going to take to move from where you are now to the next stage, to the next, to the next.
So you've got it mapped out really well, all the steps for those stages for people then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then when they've healed from something that, let's say it's a string of repeat betrayals, because they never even recognized their original betrayal as a betrayal. And then when they heal from that, they're getting their life back. They learn to trust again, open their hearts again, feel safe again. And they learn that even though the betrayal was done to them, it's not about them. And that's one of the biggest things that I see.
And I guess that could be, I think we kind of came close to this point early along, but that could be one of the distinguishers about betrayal, is that whether it's accurate or not, it's not so much seen as something that just happened. It was something that you seemed happened to you deliberately almost,
Mm-hmm.
more so than other traumas.
And that's why it's so hard to wrap our minds around. Because, here we've been playing by the rules, we've been doing the right thing, being a good person, treating others with respect and integrity, and we're assuming that other people are doing the same. I mean, I live by the most simple rule. Is it going to hurt someone? If it does, don't do it. And I assume everybody lives by those same rules. And I learned that's not the case. Yeah.
Unfortunately not.
Mm.
So someone whose interest is piqued, you mentioned this quiz. They can take a quiz and they can find out, is that a betrayal score, or that puts them on the staging, or how does that work exactly?
It's to see to what extent they're struggling with post-betrayal syndrome. And and I'll tell you that just taking the assessment, it's a little jarring, but you can't change what you're not aware of. So you may as well know what's left in the wake of your trauma, because then at least you're in a position to do something with it.
Just briefly, what are some, as we're kind of talking about who might want to think about this, what are some other categories of experiences that could be thought of as betrayal? So you mentioned, I'll open up a bit here, but you mentioned early along about how, more than just infidelity and how basically the break of a promise. And, I was adopted as a child, and I've seen quite a bit of data about how adoptees can be affected emotionally in various ways. And I can see how that could be seen, how one could see that as a betrayal. One could feel that they were rejected or not taken on, and I would have never thought of that before. So what are some other types of experiences someone could have they might not think of that could be acting as an emotional betrayal?
Mm-hmm. And that's a great one. And someone just told me the other day, they took one of those the DNA tests, and they found out that their father wasn't their father. And now we never know why someone makes these decisions, and maybe at the time it was to protect or whatever the reasoning was. But it's where we assumed something, or we believed something, and someone intentionally kept something from us, or didn't share something with us. So it really is so, it's so wide. It has such broad implications, because you could really call so many things a betrayal. But I think the biggest thing is if you feel you should have known and someone kept something from you, or you feel like you were trusting and someone wasn't playing by the same set of rules that you were, when you were, that feeling of being blindsided, that feeling of being kept in the dark, that feeling of we had these, whether they were spoken or unspoken rules, and sometimes they're unspoken, but when those were the rules long enough, they become a rule, and we just assume that's the way we play this relationship, and every relationship has rules. For example, we were going to have a conversation today, and if I didn't show up, I would have betrayed you. I mean, chances are it wouldn't have devastated you, but on some level, it would be a betrayal nonetheless. So it's and then once anything that shatters that trust, and puts our guard up, and then changes how we perceive other people, how we interact with other people. One of the things I had for the when I was doing the research was I had everybody take a post-traumatic growth assessment, and there's just to see where they're starting, where they're at. And then it was so interesting because it's broken down into different categories. And there's a category that relates to how the person who takes the quiz relates to people. And everyone scored low. And it was so interesting because when you think about it, betrayal is all about people. And this is what got in the way of healthy, strong relationships, because trust, because of just habit, where we just keep finding the same type of person, not because it's good, just because it's familiar. And they scored the lowest when it came to relating to others, because betrayals absolutely shatter our concept of what a healthy relationship should or could be, until we do the work to heal.
Just thinking about this, I imagine that over the span of one's life, you could expect that there's just more opportunities for these things to happen. Is there a matter of, does it seem that some people have more severe episodes, or some people respond to episodes differently? Or how would you differentiate that?
Everybody has a different way of reacting and responding, and so much of it has to do with, where did we come from? How did we even, if we've experienced significant childhood betrayals, that's almost guaranteeing on some level that if we don't do significant work to heal, we're going to experience adult betrayals too. So what was done, what happened in childhood? I mean, that has so much to do with it, but it's also, what's the meaning that we made out of it? What was the work we did to heal from it? What did we learn, and how did we grow as a result of it? I mean, I've seen people who've had repeat betrayals, and that's just become their world, and that's all they know. And I've also seen people who've had such extreme betrayals, and they said, oh my gosh, enough. I've carried this with me 40, 50 years, and I'm going to learn from it and do something so incredible with it. You can't undo the betrayal, but you can control how it affects you personally and professionally.
So if someone has they've gone through a betrayal of some sorts, they're suffering from that, they have ongoing anxiety, perhaps they've got digestive issues you mentioned. When you interact with someone, obviously, I guess if you do interact with them, they've already have some degree of suspicion of betrayal being relevant. But do you think that it's like not apparent for people, or do people talk about there being a long process they go through before they realize, oh, this could have been it? Or is it pretty much right on the surface when you talk to them?
I've seen it both ways. I've seen where people have no idea that this is an unhealed betrayal. And it's truly only when I say the words, when they hear the word betrayal, do they say, oh my gosh, I had no idea. So here's an example. Someone interviewed me a few weeks ago, and he's 36 years old, and he was telling me a story. He said, when I was 4 years old, my brother used to always break my toys. And so I didn't want him playing with my toys. And I had this great new toy, and he wanted to play with it. And I said, no, because you're going to break it. He said, no, I promise. Well, sure enough, he took the toy, broke it, within 2 minutes. He said, do you know I'm 36? I don't let anybody touch my stuff. You see? So there it is. I mean, there's an unhealed betrayal where here, because of his brother's actions 30 plus years ago, he's created this world where it's not safe to let anybody touch your things. That's just one example.
And he felt that was significant for him, that was holding him back in some way? Or?
He had no idea he was even doing that till I mentioned the word betrayal. That's what's so interesting, yeah.
So someone's best first steps, and we're going to get links in the show notes and everything. So someone's best first steps, would you say, would be to take the quiz and see where they fall in this continuum? Or?
Absolutely. You can't change what you're not aware of. So the first thing is to take the quiz. And I invite people to, I usually ask these 4 questions, and it's going to let you know if you're numbing, avoiding, and distracting, because if so, there could be an unhealed betrayal that you're numbing, avoiding, distracting from. So, are you numbing and avoiding? If so, how? Be honest with yourself. Am I binging? Am I putting on the TV? Am I drinking? What am I doing to not feel or face? The second question, what am I pretending not to see? Am I pretending not to see trouble in my relationship? What am I pretending not to see? Be honest. The third question, what's life going to look like in 5 to 10 years if I do nothing? Play that out. play it out 5 to 10 years with that continued behavior. What's life going to look like? And then what could life look like in 5 to 10 years if I change now?
So giving them a contrast of what a potential future could be like.
Exactly.
And I guess the important thing is you've seen people change. You've seen understanding this be transformational. So can you just give us some idea about, I don't know, what degree of recovery is possible? What kind of time frames people should think about? Or
Sure. I mean, for example, besides everybody in my program, me, I mean, here I had 2 significant betrayals from the people I trusted the most. I had every right to stay stuck and hang on to this very powerful story. But I looked at it saying, my gosh, if something so bad is going to happen, let me at least do something good with it. So think about it. I mean, here I registered for this PhD program. I did this study. We made these discoveries because of it. Now we have these programs and processes in place and a podcast and a book deal. And I speak all over the world because of it. And I'm not saying it because there's anything all that great about me. I'm just doing what anybody else could do. I just took something really bad and did something good with it. And my body healed as I was making these changes. And I'm just using myself as an example because it's just so obvious that when you do the work, you heal, because the injustice of it will eat you alive. And we just deserve so much more than that.
That's really cool. Debi Silber, thank you so much. We're going to have links to your work, and glad to share this with people.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in. Good to be with you again for another episode, and take great care. Please think about this though, because this is powerful. It's so true that stuck betrayal, stuck traumas can have profound effects in so many ways. So think this through. If this might be relevant, take the quiz, check it out, and just know that there can be help. So take great care. I'll be back with you real soon. Bye-bye. Hey, Dr. Christensen here. Thanks so much for joining me for another episode. Is there a topic you'd like me to cover? I'd love to hear from you. Just go to Dr. Alan Christensen on Facebook or Instagram, write your question, and use the hashtag #MedicalMyths. Did you find this show helpful? If so, please take a minute and leave us a rating on iTunes so that others can know. Thanks much. I'll be back with you real soon. Bye-bye.